Hi there. This is British History, the early years. First, we have the Anglo-Saxon period, or the Dark Ages. This lasted from 449 to 1066. During this time, there were violent, bloody conflicts, as well as ignorance among the people. Life was extremely difficult, and the literature of the time reflects this. People were serious-minded, and the overall theme was only the strong survive. Due to all the hard working of their life and the violence, they didn't really have time to rest and read. Julius Caesar was the first to write about England. In 55 BCE, he attempted to conquer the British Isles. He failed. Remember, never underestimate a Celt. Julius Caesar then returned home to tell everyone that he had, of course, defeated the Celts, but he didn't see a need to bother with them. But in actuality, he left the Picts the early Scots, and the Gauls, the early Irish, alone. Unfortunately for them, a century later, the Romans realized what had occurred and returned and made good on Caesar's claim. Now, the one group we're going to talk about is the Picts. The Picts were the early Scottish. When they went into battle, they painted themselves blue, or they were tatted up. They always fought naked, and women often fought in the battles. Can you imagine, there you are, a Roman centurion on the battlefield, sword in hand, and suddenly this blue, tatted up, long-haired, naked man or woman comes running at you, screaming. I think this would be rather off-putting, maybe even a bit scary. If you look at the picture on the lower portion of the screen, this is Hadrian's Wall as it stands today. Notice the man in the foreground, he's standing next to the wall. Originally, this wall was taller, but it was built several centuries ago, and since then, it's eroded down. But it's still bigger than that man, right? So this was built to keep the Scottish from stealing the Romans' cattle. It didn't help. Somehow the Scots would get over the wall, get the cattle, and get it back over the wall on their side. Would drive the Scots or the Romans crazy. The Scots would just pick at them. So finally the Romans actually left. Next we have the Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons are made up of two Germanic tribes, the Anglos and the Saxons. They invaded around 449 BC. They drove the Celts west to Cornwall and Wales, and drove them north to Scotland and across the English Channel to France, which is also known. This portion is called Brittany. Anglo-land now becomes England. Basis of English culture is the language was very guttural and vigorous, and this is known as Old English. We will hear some Old English before we start Beowulf. An example of a word is our word sentence. Their word was to zwide or dom. Then came the Vikings. During the 790s, Vikings from Denmark and Norway arrived. Now, usually they're just a hit-and-run kind of people. They come in, rape, pillage, and leave. Except they liked England. It was a little warmer than their homes without being too warm. It was less snow. Still wasn't as far. It wasn't far from their home, so they could get home easy. Now, it was said that the Anglo-Saxons did not like the Vikings due to their jealousy. They were jealous of the Vikings. Why would you think they would be jealous? Well, apparently, we see Vikings as these wild, unkept men. Apparently, this is a misnomer. Vikings actually bathed regularly, kept their hair neat, and unlike their Anglo-Saxon counterparts, so they did not bathe as much and rarely bathed and didn't take care of themselves. So why were they jealous? because it seems that the Anglo-Saxon women apparently like their men clean and well kept. They like their hair brushed, them smelling good. So the Anglo-Saxon women were suddenly attracted to the Vikings. But thankfully for the Anglo-Saxon men, this was short-lived, and probably because they were tired of losing their women to the Vikings, they met defeat in southern England by Alfred the Great. Now, from Alfred the Great comes the descendants. His descendants were the Normans. And we have Edward the Confessor. After Alfred passed, Edward the Confessor took the throne. He had no children, and so his only heir was a distant relative, William the Duke of Normandy. However, the nobles didn't really like William, and so they decided they wanted this man. He was an earl. He was Earl Harold, to be Alfred's successor. They put him on the throne. This made William very angry. He invaded, killed Harold, and became William the Conqueror when he took the throne back. I imagine he didn't make it easy on those nobles either. Next, we have the spread of Christianity. Now, originally the British were pagan. Many were Druids, but not all. They believed in weird, or as we know it, fate. They admired heroic heroes and warriors. The Anglo-Saxons, while they brought agriculture and more security and civilization, Christianity then came and opened up a bright new possibilities. The first missionaries arrived in 300 BCE. In the 5th century, St. Patrick is said to have run the snakes out of Ireland. Now, the snakes are actually symbolic for the pagans. So this is actually why we celebrate St. Patrick's Day. It is actually a religious holiday, or a religious-based holiday. Do you think the pagans actually were gone? No, they were probably driven underground, probably faked conversion or converted, and still practiced their beliefs. In 597, Roman Christian Augustine arrived in Kent and established the first monastery in Canterbury. First monastery in England, by the way. By 690, most Brits were Christian. Still, old beliefs hold tight, don't they? Here in America, when we think of a fairy or fae, they look like this in our pictures. They look like Tinkerbell. They look like the 3 caregivers of Aurora in Sleeping Beauty, or a gnome, a simple garden gnome. Now, this, of course, is not including the Native Americans' belief of the little people. These are fae-type creatures that can be helpful or harmful depending on your actions and or their moods. They really are very similar to the British fae, but hopefully not as deadly. But in the United Kingdom, specifically in the Celtic regions of Wales, Ireland, Scotland, Brittany, and Cornwall, the belief in the fairy, while it has waned some, is still a true and valid belief. Example, the picture on the left of the hill with the trees. If you are traveling through Ireland, you stay away, especially at night, from the fairy hills. They are known to be very dangerous. They are thought to, the fae will kidnap you, maybe even kill and torture you. Here is a story about the kingdom of the fairies in Inverness, Scotland.
In this place is Torvain Hill, which is a large hill to the west of the Inverness seaside. As you can see, it is used as a cemetery. But I beg you to know that somewhere in this hill is the kingdom of the fairies. This little hill in Inverness started out the whole story about fairies that you all know, Tinkerbell, the whole lot. The story goes, 2 musicians were walking home one night. They meet a strange chap who asks them to come and play for them at a big party. This chap takes them to this very hill, and a door opens up. The musicians go in, they play, they have a massive party, a good time. 2 musicians in the morning are thanked, given a bag of gold, and sent on their way. Only the musicians are looking around and thinking, this is strange, what's happened? People are wearing different clothes, the houses look strange. Little did they know that that night they played, 200 years had passed. When they went to church to seek answers, turned to dust.
So guys, I don't know if you caught the end of that, because he kind of says it quietly, but when the musicians went to church to find some answers of what had happened to them of being in the fairy realm, when they walked in, they turned to dust. Now, here's some other beliefs that are still widely held. The Mary Lwyd of Wales. I wish we could play this, but it won't play. But it is a story of this creature. Oh, here it is.
Folklore in 60 seconds. We're going to be chatting about the Mary Lwyd. Big up to Skulls and Sheets on Etsy, who's done these artistic representations of the Mary Lwyd. So the Mary Lwyd is made up of a fella holding up a pole that has a horse skull on top of it, and some other blokes carrying the flowing robes that kind of flows behind it. Now, it's part of a wassailing folk custom in Wales and also southern England as well. So wassailing was usually by the lower classes to the upper classes. So your working people in an area would, knock on the lord's manor and basically get loads of booze and food. But sometimes it was going to neighbours' doors and being like, excuse me, let me in. And then your neighbour goes, no, I won't let you in. And you go back and forth until they let you in and they give you a wassail, the ale. Also happens in orchards as well because, apples and cider and ale. Yeah, imagine that creepy fella knocking on your door and singing at you. Love it. Oh, here we come. Folklore in 60 seconds. Folklore in 60 seconds. Here is an excellent example of folklore that has travelled across the world. So, the knockers in Cornish folklore are gnome-like creatures that live inside mines, and they knock on the side of mine shafts when the mine is about to collapse. Now, miners are supposed to celebrate and look after knockers, so when you're eating your Cornish pasty, you're supposed to leave the last bit or the crust left over for the knockers, so there's a nice mutual relationship there. Now, this is really similar to the Welsh cobbler now, who serve exactly the same function. They live inside the mines and they sort of look after the miners working there, but there has to be that sort of relationship. They can be mischievous, but mostly they're not dangerous. So when Cornish and Welsh miners travelled to America, they brought their folklore with them, which brings us to Tommyknockers in American folklore. They wear mining garb and usually carry little pickaxes and carry little lanterns.